Hi there, this is Frit Rinker. I hope you check out my other videos. I talk about topics to do with the problems with economics, the robo-economy, which is the economy driven by AI, robots and renewables, and the bioeconomy, and basically try to talk about solutions and not so much as the problems because they are, of course, everywhere to see. And this video is about basically the bioeconomy, and we don't. I'm from Holland. I don't really experience the bioeconomy in its natural form. Haven't really in my life. In Holland, the bioeconomy, basically the organic farming economy with self-sustaining farmers, is more or less a romantic idea. So many people that I've met in my life, and of course also many people that realized that dream, wanted to have a farm later on when they get older. They move to France, they start a little farm, etc. But usually they have like a pension or something like that, and they live off that, and then they buy stuff, and they have a garden. They garden a little bit. My mother did the same thing. She had a forest and she had a garden. It's all beautiful, but that's not really the bioeconomy. The bioeconomy is the situation in which people really live off the land 100%, and they live with very little modern things like televisions or not even warm water. They don't really need it. If they can heat water or if the water is drinkable that they have, that's the pure bioeconomy. And if you go to Asia, you can see that, or you can be very close to that situation. And the interesting thing about the bioeconomy, I think, is that it is very cheap. It's very like there's basically not, you don't really need money. You can use money to exchange the different products that you grow. So some people grow bananas, papayas, melons, oranges, all the food because it grows like mad there if it's not too hot. Rice, of course, and then you have cattle, you have a buffalo on the field, and you eat the rice. The same, of course, goes for Holland, but in Holland it's not the pure form because Holland had a couple of famines in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and it decided to develop intensive farming, and with let's say the massive production of fertilizer in the Second World War as part of making bombs, that whole fertilizer-based economy got going, and it kept going, and that's what we have with intensive farms at the moment. That whole approach is problematic when you have to deal with people that are not able to function in the economy, that are not necessary. And it's like you can make a mathematical equation that demonstrates that the economy is trying to get rid of people. Of course, it's automating all the time, and it's using machines and fossil energy instead of people or instead of animals. That's all not news. But the problem with the economy is that it doesn't try to solve any problem that is not related to making more profit. And that's the fundamental aim of economism. And that's also the capitalist economy in America, and of course the capitalist economy in Europe, everywhere, is to make as much profit as possible to generate as much cash flow as possible. I was in Vietnam recently, and I keep referring to that, but there I learned that the pesticides used for the growing of shrimp are destroying the ecosystem, so that people can no longer get fish from the mangroves or farm seaweed. And why is that happening? Because the cash flow generated by shrimp farming is highest. And even when I talk to a guy that works for a company that sells the pesticides that are used in order to, let's say, maintain the health of the shrimp, he was simply blind. He was simply not interested in what happened to the rest of the economy, because some people are simply basically brought up, educated in a way that makes them blind to anything that is outside the economy, that has nothing to do with making money, that don't cost money. And I talk about that now because I was once again approached about, let's say, a climate innovation initiative which is supported by Bill Gates. But Bill Gates is per excellence a person that only can think in terms of money. And that seems to be like a random, like an obvious attitude, until you realize that it is not obvious. It is the attitude that banks want you to have, that banks profit from. And you realize that when you go to places like Battambang in Cambodia, where I was, where you can see that there's two economies. There's one is the bioeconomy, and the people use currencies that have very low value. So the smallest amount of value the currency has there, I think it's the real or something like that, is like 1/10 of a cent or even less. But that's enough to trade. You can have one piece of ginger or one fish, one catfish from the river, or one melon or one papaya, and it's really really cheap, and it's abundant. People grow all that food and they go to the market and they catch the fish. They go to the market. They wait around in the heat, and the fish goes bad, and then like it's incredible how much food they have, and food is very cheap. And then around that market, you can see exchange offices where you can get dollars in return for your reals, and then it's 4,000 real for what's it? I forget the exchange rate. But suddenly you're dealing with dollars, and a dollar is has buying power. Of course, everybody accepts it. It's like equivalent. But there's different things that you need the dollar for. You need it for gasoline. You need it for things that use gasoline. Everything that uses fossil fuels, you need dollars. Otherwise, people cannot buy the fuel, or they need to. So basically, that's the fossil economy happening there. And of course, the fossil economy is slowly going to push away the bioeconomy, because those farms will be turned into intensive farms with pesticides and herbicides and fertilizer, because that's cash flow generating. And that's how you then turn a country from poor, between quotation marks, because it is not poor, because it has all the food it needs, it has all the shelter it needs, and it can in principle have all the medical care it needs. But like that's a habituation thing in the poor countries. People get used to the fact that if you break a leg, then you're just a lame person for the rest of your life. So that changes. That is really something that is, of course, presented as a huge achievement of the developed, between quotation marks again, economistic countries over the underdeveloped countries. But of course, if you go to an underdeveloped country, like Brazil was one of the countries that didn't care about patents on medicine, because it says, well, if we can cure people, then we're gonna make the pharmaceutical compounds that we can use for that. We're not gonna like pay some pharmaceutical company in America money for that. And China, I think China did the same, and India. And like it's not expensive to make a doctor, to create a medical doctor. It's not expensive to make pharmaceutical compounds, most of them, the most, let's say, common ones. It's not expensive at all. So a poor country can have the same facilities as a rich country. It just has no high cash flow economy. And the problem with the high cash flow economies, as Europe and China and America are finding out, is that these economies are trying to optimize themselves so that they don't need any people. This is very obviously happening at the moment with the AI, and then the desire to make androids, robots that will be human-like. We know that for 100% sure now, because it's demonstrated. All these chat apps. I mean, if you can run GTP chat from a cloud server situation, you can run an army of 1 million robots that can just talk and do everything, and they will still be centrally controlled, which will be the most efficient solution, I think. Also because many decisions will be similar, so you can basically have kind of a cache of solutions, which you do not have if you have a standalone AI system. Anyway, that's a bit of a diversion, but the economy will automate and will make people redundant at an alarming rate, and it will accelerate now because of AI massively. So already, of course, a lot of graphic designers are out of a job because people make marketing material with Grok. Music is next. Film is, of course, going to follow. All the human art will become replaceable. And of course, if you have people like Mark Zuckerberg, who also uh, basically announced that he chose the dark side, he chose to build the Matrix basically with his goggles, with his new Orion augmented reality glasses, which is the most basically most threatening technology you can have. You know that people will be redundant, and they will not be able to make money in the economy. A lot of them it's already happening. People are being laid off, and the economy is not trying to find a solution for that, because the economy, which is the banks trying to generate cash flow, is only looking for things to generate cash flow with. So to sell to people. And if there's, let's say, there's two sides of it. If the resource runs out, then you move on to another resource. And if the people run out, then then the whole thing stops. And then you can do economic stimulation, as it's happening again right now with the lowering interest rates, which means that you give people some money so that they can spend the money, and then you have economic activity. And then you can make up jobs. That has happened also. There's the bullshit jobs. It's very predictable. I think I already talked about it like 20 years ago. But so you basically give jobs to people that are very simple jobs, but you pay them well, and then they can spend it in the economy, which is the industry, the machine that makes everything. And that is the economistic logic. And of course, eventually that economistic logic is going to break down because people are not cooperating. So they're all trying to get as much money from you, and it's basically a chaotic system. It's an uncoordinated system, and the whole hate of socialism is that socialism is a coordinated system. It's a system where some human person with a human existential requirement filter looks at the situation and tries to organize it so that people can exist. The economy doesn't want to do that, and if you even mention socialism, let alone communism, which is usually totalitarianism, but it's a segue. But if you mention the socialist aspect of Europe, for instance, then that's not what banks want to hear. But it's a dead end. That's 100% clear. Economy is a dead end for people, dead end street. And the only way to get out of it is to go back to the bioeconomy. Because if a person is not able to make any money, that's fine as long as he can bring about growing food for himself. And now, I'm not saying that we have to go back to shacks and hovels and whatever, but the economy hoards the economistic products like solar panels and wind farms and etc. It wants it in the cash flow system, and it doesn't want to distribute them. In Holland, we have actually right now the discussion that farmers apparently hate wind turbines, which is bullshit. Because the first people in Holland that built wind turbines were farmers. They wanted it because it's like you put it on your land, and your land becomes way more valuable. Every square meter of it costs money, but now there's a wind turbine that generates thousands of euros, if not 100,000 euros of electricity every year. So you do it. But there's a new generation, and they don't understand, and the political party for the farmers is telling the farmers that they hate wind turbines, so they all go like, yes, we hate wind turbines, because the farmers are 100% economistic. I hope this is interesting. But basically, my plea is to consider bringing back farming for people that are not able to make money in any other way, to make that the standard solution. And not in the most primitive way, but in a coordinated way, in a socialist way. So socialist system is the best because that's where you basically use people to guide your economy. And capitalism is where you use money to guide your economy, banks, profit. Socialism is where you say people can cooperate, and that's way cheaper than compete. And people can farm together, and they can have little, let's say, even in the cities, you can have in every street, you can grow food, and then like grapes grow fantastically in most cities. Like when the sun shines, it's warm enough. Apples grow everywhere, potatoes, whatever, and this has been a solution of economies or basically countries that have been cut off from the economy, like Cuba, for instance. They tried it there, and whatever country tried to escape capitalism was usually punished by being cut off from the fossil fuel supply, which is 100% capitalistic, of course, and they usually try to fix that by more farming and then doing it, let's say, making sure that people grow their own food. But there should be a robo-economic bioeconomy restoration where you say, well, we can use AI, robots, renewables in order to assist people in growing food and, of course, allow the technology that is existing in the fossil economy, that is basically either hoarded by the fossil economy. So let's say, for instance, desert greenhouses, which are greenhouses you can use in the desert. It sounds paradoxical, but that means that you have climate regulation, that you can have desalination with solar heat in your greenhouse, etc., etc. That invention has more or less been hidden from most people's awareness. There's a desert greenhouse in Saudi Arabia or something like that, or in Qatar. There's one in Australia, far away, and nobody ever hears about it. But what the desert greenhouse means is that in deserts you can grow like every type of food you want. It's not hard. It's completely possible. And that's just one, but that's a technology that basically patented and repatented. It's owned by Goldman Sachs was involved, and it's done the same way as many types of technology that would reduce cash flow, that would, for instance, reduce international transportation of food. So that's a cash flow generating activity. And if you say, well, there's no such cash flow generating activity, is nonsense. Think about flowers or shrimp. We used to catch shrimp in Holland. They would be flown to Morocco to be peeled and then flown back to Holland to be sold. We have flowers that are made in greenhouses in the western area of the country, which is now being discouraged because the gas consumption is massive. But of course, that was the reason why it happened. Massive gas consumption, patents on the flowers, flying the flowers all across the world. Imagine flying a flower to South America or to China or something like that. There's nothing more ridiculous than doing that. But it's a cash flow generator, so it's economistic. Anyway, this is just to bring the idea to the front that growing your own food or creating farms for people that have nothing else that they can do which is useful can be a good idea. And then the added advantage is that you can find ways how can you make that work in relationship with the current climate changes, and what can they grow, etc. And so suddenly, and okay, then you have to repopulate the countryside. You have to make it safe to be there, so there cannot be a lot of glyphosate or Monsanto Roundup dust blowing around. You can make cities where people live close to the place where they farm, but you don't have to make it like some kind of primitive African village or something that you wouldn't like. I guess, funnily enough, the kibbutz, which is the Israeli model of a farming community, with which they started to colonize the Palestinians, might be a good model for that, which is people from all across the world there, and I visited one, live in relatively basic homes, but spacious, outside, farming area around it. They farm around it, basically the old-fashioned farming village. Um, and they take care of themselves. They grow their own food, they have their own water supply, of course, and then they can have renewable energy sources to power the whole thing. They can do recycling of everything. They can avoid plastic packaging. They can avoid logistics for long distances. They can just grow their own stuff. And this is not an economistic model because the cash flow will be lower. But it is, of course, a good solution to take care of people, which are no longer needed in the economy. Anyway, I hope this is interesting.